I never thought a single sentence could destroy 6 years of loyalty. But when the new hire leaned in close on her first day and whispered those words, everything I thought I knew about my career, my boss, and my worth came crashing down. My name is Jessica Martinez, and this is the story of how I discovered I was being systematically replaced at the job I'd built from the ground up. And how, when I finally confronted my boss, I uncovered a betrayal so deep it didn't just cost him his company. It cost him everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. I started working at Riverside Marketing 6 years ago. Fresh out of college, 22 years old, hungry to prove myself. The company was small then. Just my boss, Marcus Webb, his business partner, David Chen, and 2 other employees. We operated out of a cramped office above a coffee shop, living on instant ramen and big dreams. Marcus hired me as a junior marketing coordinator. The salary was terrible, but Marcus promised that if I worked hard, if I helped build the company, I'd grow with it. And I did work hard. 60-hour weeks were normal. 70-hour weeks during big campaigns. I learned everything. Social media marketing, email campaigns, SEO, content creation, client relations, project management. Whatever the company needed, I taught myself how to do it. I was promoted to marketing manager after 2 years, then senior marketing manager after another year. By year 4, I was essentially running the entire marketing department because by then, we actually had a marketing department. Riverside Marketing had grown from 5 employees to 35. We'd moved into a real office building. We had major clients, million-dollar contracts, recognition in the industry, and I'd been part of building all of it. Marcus always said I was his right hand, that he couldn't have done it without me, that when the company eventually went public or got acquired, I'd be taken care of. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I'd been there from almost the beginning. I'd sacrificed relationships, health, personal time, all for this company. But 6 years in, things started to feel different. Marcus became distant, stopped including me in important meetings, started having closed-door conversations with David that would end abruptly when I walked by. I told myself I was being paranoid. The company was growing. Marcus was busy. It was normal. Then came the announcement. 3 weeks ago, Marcus called an all-hands meeting. He stood in front of the entire company, looking excited, and announced that we were expanding the marketing department. We'd be bringing in some new talent to help handle our growing client base. He looked right at me when he said it, smiled, said this would take some pressure off me, let me focus on strategy instead of day-to-day execution. I smiled back, nodded, said that sounded great, but something in my gut twisted. A week later, Marcus called me into his office. He told me we'd hired someone, Amanda Richardson. She was starting the following Monday. She had 15 years of experience in marketing, had worked at some big-name agencies, came highly recommended. He asked if I'd train her, show her the ropes, get her up to speed on our clients, our processes, our systems. Of course, I said yes. That's what team players do. But that feeling in my gut got worse. Amanda Richardson arrived on Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. She was polished. Expensive suit, perfect hair, confident handshake. Mid-40s, with the kind of put-together appearance that screamed success. Marcus personally walked her around the office, introducing her to everyone. When he got to me, he put his hand on my shoulder. He said Amanda would be working closely with me, learning from the best. He was confident we'd make a great team. Amanda smiled warmly, said she'd heard such wonderful things about me. She was excited to learn from someone who'd been instrumental in building the company. I smiled back and told her welcome to the team. Marcus left us to get started. I brought Amanda to my office, pulled up a chair next to my desk, and began walking her through everything. Our client list, our current campaigns, our project management system, our brand guidelines, our team structure. Amanda asked good questions, took detailed notes, seemed genuinely interested. We broke for lunch. I offered to show her the good places nearby to grab food. As we walked to the elevator, Amanda leaned in close enough that no one else would hear. And she whispered, "Thanks for training your replacement." I stopped walking, turned to look at her. She was smiling, but it wasn't a warm smile anymore. It was cold, calculating. I asked her what she just said. She straightened up, her voice back to normal volume. She said, "Oh, she just thanked me for the training. This was so helpful." But I knew what I heard. Your replacement. I felt my blood run cold. I forced myself to smile and said, "No problem. That's what I'm here for." We got lunch, made small talk. Amanda acted perfectly normal, professional, friendly. But I couldn't stop thinking about those words. Was I being replaced? Was that what this was? I told myself I must have misheard. Or maybe it was a joke in poor taste. Or maybe Amanda was just one of those people who says things without thinking. But when we got back from lunch, I noticed something. Marcus called Amanda into his office. They were in there for an hour with the door closed. When Amanda came out, she was smiling. She sat back down at the desk I'd set up for her next to mine and said Marcus was just giving her some additional context. Really helpful guy. I asked what kind of context. She said, "Oh, just company history, future plans, that sort of thing." Future plans. Plans I apparently wasn't included in. I spent the rest of the afternoon training Amanda while my mind raced. I noticed things I hadn't noticed before. Marcus had moved some of my client files to a shared folder. Files that used to be just mine. The upcoming strategy meeting for our biggest client. Amanda was now on the invite. I checked my email. I'd been removed. The new business pitch we had next week. Amanda was listed as the lead. My name wasn't on it at all. Everything was starting to make horrible sense. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything from the past few weeks. The closed-door meetings, Marcus avoiding me, the sudden hearing of someone with my exact skill set, being asked to train her, Amanda's whispered comment, being removed from meetings and projects I'd been leading. I grabbed my laptop and logged into my work email. I searched for any emails between Marcus and Amanda before her hire date. Nothing came up. He must have used his personal email or been smart enough to delete them. But then I searched for emails between Marcus and David about new hires. I found something from 2 months ago. David had forwarded Marcus a resume. Amanda Richardson's resume. David's note said, "This could work. Experienced, established, won't push back. Could take over most of Jessica Martinez's responsibilities within 6 months." Marcus's response, "Let's talk in person. Don't email about this." They knew I might see these emails, but David had slipped up, sent this one anyway. I kept searching. I found an email from the company's HR consultant to Marcus from 3 weeks ago. Subject line, termination documentation. The email discussed building a case for letting someone go. It didn't name names in the email body, but the attachment was titled Jessica Martinez Performance Issues .docx. I didn't have access to the attachment, but I didn't need it. They were building a case to fire me, manufacturing performance issues, creating a paper trail, and they'd hired my replacement before they'd even started the termination process. I felt sick. 6 years. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, of sacrificing everything for this company, of being told I was invaluable. And they were replacing me. Worse, they were making me train my own replacement. I wanted to cry, to scream, to march into Marcus's office first thing in the morning and quit. But then I thought about Amanda's smile, about Marcus's fake warmth, about David's calculating emails. They wanted me to quit. That's what this was. Make my job so unbearable, so humiliating that I'd quit on my own. Then they wouldn't have to pay severance, wouldn't have to deal with potential wrongful termination claims. They wanted me gone, but they wanted it to be my choice. So I decided something right then and there. I wasn't going to quit. I was going to make them fire me. And when they did, I was going to make sure they regretted it. The next morning, I came into work with a plan. First, I needed documentation. Proof of everything I'd accomplished at this company. I spent my lunch break forwarding emails to my personal account. Emails showing client wins I'd secured, projects I'd led, revenue I'd generated, compliments from clients specifically about my work. I documented everything. Then I scheduled a meeting with HR. Our HR manager, Karen, had always been friendly with me. I told her I wanted to discuss my career development, my role trajectory. She seemed happy I was being proactive. During the meeting, I asked about the formal review process, when my next review was scheduled. what the criteria were for promotions and raises. Karen pulled up my file. She told me my next review was actually scheduled for next month. She seemed surprised I was asking about it. I asked if there were any performance concerns she was aware of. She looked confused. She said no, not at all. My last review had been excellent. All my metrics were strong. I thanked her and left. So Marcus and David were building a fake case against me, but HR didn't know about it yet. That was useful information. Over the next week, I continued training Amanda while documenting everything. I noticed more red flags. Amanda started being included in executive meetings I used to attend. Marcus would ask Amanda for her opinion on strategies I'd developed. He'd praise her insights, which were literally just reworded versions of things I'd been saying for months. Our biggest client, TechVision, was coming in for a quarterly review meeting. I'd been managing their account for 4 years. They loved me. Their CEO, Richard, always asked for me specifically. But when the meeting invite went out, Amanda was listed as the primary contact. I was listed as support. Support, on an account I'd built from scratch. I decided it was time to have a conversation with Richard. I called him directly and asked if we could grab coffee before the quarterly meeting. He agreed. We'd always had a good relationship. Over coffee, I asked him casually how he felt about the account, if there was anything he needed from us that he wasn't getting. Richard said everything was great. He loved working with me. I'd transformed their marketing. He actually wanted to discuss expanding our contract. I told him that was fantastic. Then I mentioned that Amanda would be joining our meeting, getting up to speed on his account. Richard looked confused. He asked why. Was I going somewhere? I told him honestly that I wasn't sure. There had been some organizational changes, and I wanted to make sure he was taken care of regardless of what happened on our end. Richard frowned. He told me very clearly that if I left Riverside, he'd want to know where I went, because TechVision's business would follow me. That was exactly what I needed to hear. I thanked him and said I'd keep him posted. The quarterly meeting was 2 days later. Marcus, David, Amanda, and I sat across from Richard and his team. Marcus started the presentation, walking through results from the past quarter, results that I had generated. But he kept saying we did this, the team accomplished that, never specifically crediting me. Then he transitioned to Amanda, asking her to talk about future strategy. Amanda smiled confidently and began presenting ideas. My ideas. Word for word from a strategy document I'd written 3 weeks ago. She didn't credit me once. She presented them as if she'd developed them herself. I watched Richard's face. He was frowning. He kept glancing at me. Finally, he interrupted Amanda mid-sentence. He said, "Excuse me, but wasn't this the strategy Jessica had proposed to him last month?" Amanda's face flushed. She said, "Well, yes, the team had collaborated on it." Richard looked at Marcus. He said he wanted to be clear about something. He'd been working with me for 4 years. I understood his business, his goals, his challenges. He appreciated that we were expanding our team, but he wanted to ensure I remained his primary point of contact. Marcus smiled stiffly and assured him that of course I would. But I saw the look Marcus shot me after Richard looked away. It was pure anger. I just made myself harder to replace. After the meeting, Marcus asked me to come to his office. I followed him, my heart pounding. He closed the door and turned to me. He said he appreciated my relationship with Richard, but going forward, I needed to make sure Amanda was looped in on all client communications. He wanted her to build relationships with our clients too. I told him, of course, I was happy to collaborate, but I also mentioned that Richard had specifically requested that I remain his main contact. Marcus's jaw tightened. He said he understood, but this wasn't just about what clients wanted. This was about what was best for the company's growth and sustainability. Having multiple people familiar with each account was important. I said I completely agreed. In fact, maybe we should formalize that. Create clear role definitions, account ownership structures, that sort of thing. That way everyone would know exactly what their responsibilities were. Marcus looked uncomfortable. He said that wasn't necessary. We were a small company. We stayed flexible. But I pressed. I said with the company growing, it might be good to have that clarity, especially for someone new like Amanda. Marcus said he'd think about it and dismissed me. I walked back to my desk where Amanda was sitting, going through my client files. She looked up at me with that cold smile. She said that was quite a performance in the meeting, really making sure Richard knows who's indispensable. I smiled back and told her I was just doing my job, taking care of our client. Amanda's smile faded. She said she hoped I wasn't making this difficult. Transitions were always easier when everyone cooperated. I asked what transition she was referring to. She paused, seeming to realize she'd said too much. She recovered and said just the transition of her joining the team, learning the ropes. I told her I was happy to help with that. After all, that's what Marcus asked me to do, train her. Over the next 2 weeks, the tension escalated. Marcus started nitpicking my work. He'd find minor issues with presentations I'd given dozens of times before. He'd question my strategies in front of the team. He'd reassign my projects to Amanda at the last minute. Every move was calculated to undermine me, to build that case that I was underperforming. But I was documenting everything, every unfair criticism, every project reassignment, every meeting I was excluded from. I was building my own case. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Marcus called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. He had David there too. My stomach dropped. This was it. Marcus told me to sit down. He looked uncomfortable. He started by saying how much he appreciated everything I'd done for the company, how instrumental I'd been in their growth. But companies evolve, he said. Needs change. And sometimes that means roles need to change too. He said they'd been evaluating the organizational structure, and they felt that my role had become redundant. With Amanda's experience and skill set, they were going to consolidate the marketing leadership into one position, and they decided to move forward with Amanda in that role. I was being let go, effective immediately. They'd provide 2 weeks severance, which was generous considering I was an at-will employee. I could take the rest of the day to pack my things. I sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. 6 years, 2 weeks severance. I looked at Marcus, then at David, then back at Marcus, and I said the words I'd been planning. I told them interesting. So I've been replaced, just like Amanda told me I would be on her first day. Marcus's face went white. David's eyes widened. I continued. I said yes. Her very first day, Amanda whispered to me that I was training my replacement. At the time, I thought maybe I'd misheard, but clearly I didn't. Marcus started stammering. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. Amanda never said that. David jumped in, saying I was obviously upset and maybe misremembering. I smiled. I told them it was okay. I understood. But I was curious about one thing, the performance issues document. The one the HR consultant helped them create 3 weeks ago. I'd love to see that. Because according to my conversation with Karen last week, my last review was excellent and there were no documented concerns. The color completely drained from Marcus's face. He asked how I knew about that document. I told him I knew a lot of things, like how David emailed him about hearing my replacement 2 months ago, how I'd been systematically removed from projects and meetings, how Amanda had been brought in specifically because she wouldn't push back. I stood up. I told them I'd be happy to leave, but I wouldn't be signing anything today. I'd be taking my documentation to an employment lawyer to discuss wrongful termination and constructive dismissal. I'd also be reaching out to our clients, particularly Richard at Tech Vision, to let them know I was no longer with the company. I was sure they'd want to know. Marcus stood up quickly. He said I couldn't do that. I had a non-compete clause. I told him actually I didn't. I'd reviewed my employment contract last night. There was a non-solicitation clause saying I couldn't actively recruit Riverside clients, but there was nothing stopping me from informing them of my departure, and nothing stopping them from choosing to follow me if they wanted to. David's face was red now. He said I was threatening them. I said no, I was simply exercising my rights, just like they were exercising their right to fire me. But if they wanted me to sign a separation agreement, to agree not to pursue legal action, to agree not to contact clients, well, that was going to cost more than 2 weeks' severance. Marcus asked what I wanted. I told them I wanted what I'd earned. 6 years of stock options that they'd been promising me, the bonus they'd delayed paying me for the last 2 quarters, and 6 months severance with continued health insurance, plus a neutral reference. David exploded. He said that was ridiculous. That was over $200,000. They'd never agree to that. I shrugged and told them that was fine. My lawyer would be in touch about the wrongful termination suit. I'd be sure to include all my documentation. The emails about replacing me, the fabricated performance issues, Amanda's confession on day 1. Marcus held up his hand to stop David. He asked if I'd really go through with a lawsuit. I told him absolutely. I'd spent 6 years building this company. I'd sacrificed everything. And they'd repaid me by hearing my replacement, making me train her, and then discarding me with 2 weeks severance. Yes, I'd absolutely go through with it. More importantly, I'd win. Because I had documentation proving they'd planned my termination while telling me everything was fine. That was textbook bad faith. Any jury would side with me, and the publicity would destroy their reputation with clients and potential hires. Marcus and David exchanged looks. Finally, Marcus said they'd need to discuss this with their lawyer. I told them they had until end of business tomorrow. After that, I'd file the complaint and reach out to clients. I walked out of his office, went to my desk, and started packing my things. Amanda watched me nervously. She asked what happened. I told her she could ask Marcus. Congratulations on the promotion, by the way. She stammered that she didn't know that Marcus never told her. I smiled and said sure. I told her good luck. She'd need it. That night, I got a call from Marcus. He said they'd agree to my terms with one modification, 4 months severance instead of 6, and I had to sign an NDA agreeing never to discuss the circumstances of my departure. I told him 5 months severance, and I'd agree to the NDA, but I wanted everything in writing by tomorrow morning, or the deal was off. He agreed. The next morning, I received the separation agreement, 5 months severance. My stock options vested immediately. My delayed bonuses paid in full, health insurance through the end of the year, a neutral reference, and an NDA. I had a lawyer review it that afternoon. She said it was solid. I signed it. $240,000 deposited into my account within a week. I walked away from Riverside Marketing with my head held high and my bank account healthier than it had ever been. But the story doesn't end there. Because 3 weeks after I left, Richard called me. He told me he'd noticed I was no longer at Riverside. He asked where I'd landed. I told him I was considering my options. He asked if I'd be interested in consulting work. Tech Vision needed marketing help, and he trusted me. I said I'd love to discuss it. We met for coffee. Richard offered me a 6-month consulting contract at double my previous salary. I accepted. Within a month, 2 more of my former clients reached out. They'd heard I'd left Riverside and wanted to work with me directly. I started my own marketing consultancy. Within 6 months, I had 5 major clients, all former Riverside accounts. I was making more money than I ever had and working half the hours. But the best part, the absolute best part, I heard through the grapevine that Riverside was struggling. Turned out Amanda wasn't as experienced as her resume claimed. She'd exaggerated her background. Marcus and David had been so eager to replace me with someone cheaper and more compliant that they hadn't properly vetted her. She bungled the Tech Vision account within 2 months. Richard pulled the contract. Other clients started leaving too. They'd worked with me, not Riverside. When I left, they had no loyalty to the company. Within a year of my departure, Riverside lost 40% of its client base. They had to lay off staff. David wanted to sue me for violation of the non-solicitation clause, but Marcus knew they had no case. The clients had reached out to me, not the other way around. I heard Amanda was fired after 6 months. Turns out replacing someone isn't as easy as it looks, especially when you don't actually have the skills to do the job. Marcus tried to reach out to me multiple times, wanted to grab coffee, talk about old times, maybe discuss consulting opportunities. I ignored every message. 2 years later, I heard Riverside Marketing was shutting down. They couldn't recover from the client losses. Marcus had to sell the company assets for pennies on the dollar. I won't lie, there was a part of me that felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt free. I'd spent 6 years being loyal to people who saw me as disposable, who were willing to humiliate me, to make me train my own replacement, all to save a few bucks. But their short-sighted greed cost them everything. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I'd built something of my own, something no one could take away from me. My consultancy grew. I hired employees, people I trusted, people I treated well. I made sure they had clear roles, fair compensation, and job security, because I knew what it felt like to be betrayed by an employer, and I never wanted anyone working for me to experience that. I ran into Marcus once, about 3 years after I left Riverside. He was at a coffee shop, looking tired and older. He saw me and tried to smile. He congratulated me on my success, said he'd been following my company, asked if I'd ever consider grabbing coffee, talking about potential partnerships. I looked at him for a long moment. The man who'd made me believe I was valued while planning to discard me. The man who'd made me train my own replacement. The man who thought 2 weeks severance was generous after 6 years of 60-hour weeks. I told him no thank you. I wasn't interested. He looked hurt. He said he understood I was probably still upset, but it had been years. Water under the bridge. Maybe we could move past it. I told him I had moved past it. I'd moved on to bigger and better things. But that didn't mean I wanted him in my life. He made his choices. He decided I was replaceable. Turned out he was wrong. But that was his problem, not mine. He asked what he could do to make it right. I told him nothing. There was nothing he could do. He couldn't give me back 6 years of loyalty. He couldn't undo the humiliation of training Amanda. He couldn't erase the betrayal. The best thing he could do was learn from it, treat his next employees better, value people, be honest. He nodded slowly and said he was sorry. For what it was worth, he regretted how things went down. I told him I appreciated that, but an apology 3 years later didn't change anything. I wished him well and walked away. As I left that coffee shop, I realized I meant it when I said I'd moved past it. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I'd built something better from the ashes of that betrayal. And in a weird way, Marcus and David and Amanda had done me a favor. They'd pushed me out of a situation where I was undervalued and underpaid. They'd forced me to realize my worth and bet on myself. If they'd never hired Amanda, if they'd never tried to replace me, I might still be at Riverside, still working 60-hour weeks, still being promised future rewards that would never come, still being loyal to people who didn't deserve it. Instead, I was running my own company, making 3 times what I made at Riverside, working with clients who valued me, and sleeping soundly at night knowing that no one could fire me, replace me, or betray me because I was in control of my own destiny. So to Marcus, David, and Amanda, wherever they are now, I want to say thank you. Thank you for showing me that loyalty is a two-way street. Thank you for teaching me to value myself even when others don't. Thank you for proving that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing, because it forces you to leave a situation that's been holding you back and step into something better. And to anyone watching this who's ever felt undervalued at work, who's ever been asked to train their own replacement, who's ever been betrayed by an employer they were loyal to, I want you to know something. You are not replaceable. Your skills, your experience, your relationships, your knowledge, those are yours. No one can take them away from you. When someone tries to replace you, they're not diminishing your value. They're revealing their own lack of judgment. They're showing you that they don't deserve your loyalty. And they're giving you permission to leave and find somewhere better, somewhere that values you. Don't let anyone make you feel disposable. Document everything. Know your worth. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to walk away. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success. It's building something better. It's proving them wrong simply by thriving without them. My name is Jessica Martinez. 6 years ago, I thought I was building my boss's dream. Turns out, I was building my own. I just didn't know it yet. And when my boss tried to replace me with someone cheaper and more compliant, when he made me train my own replacement, When he thought he could discard me after 6 years of loyalty, he made the biggest mistake of his professional life. Because he didn't replace me, he freed me, and I've never looked back.